CKGSB, China's only not-for-profit independent business school.
Essentially, necessity is the mother of invention. So we see amazing innovation coming out of China, India and Africa in mobile, for example, simply because in order to reach much poorer people, you have to innovate and find new models. And and in fact, what's happening now is that European operators are borrowing aspects of the business models from India or from Africa, which is, I think, fascinating. In many ways, developed economies are constrained by the systems that they already have. I mean, the reason we don't have mobile payments in Europe, it's easier to pay for your taxi with your phone in Nairobi than it is in New York, is because we have, essentially incumbent payment systems, banks, that work well enough that there's really no incentive to change them. And of course the banks want to keep things the way they are. So actually starting with a clean sheet, and the best example is the way that the developed world is leapfrogging from no telephony to mobile telephony and not bothering with fixed telephony in the middle. But actually having a clean sheet can be, and similarly mobile payments is another good example. People are going from no payments technology to mobile payments and not bothering with the intermediate bank account stage. I think this is great, and so I really love these examples where Kenya leads the world in mobile money. India has these amazingly innovative mobile operator models. So does Africa. I mean, variable pricing in Africa, which came out of Tanzania and South Africa. And then the Indians going to Africa and to compete with the African operators. That's going to be fascinating to watch as well. And then out of China, you have companies like Huawei who come up with actually very innovative technology for things like remote radio head or software-defined base stations, things like that. They have to because of special characteristics of the Chinese market, the need to upgrade base stations, the lack of space. And so they come up with these great innovations which can then be applied in other countries. So I'm really fascinated by all of this, and in many ways the sort of centre of gravity of innovation is moving towards, or has moved towards, the developing world. China's ability to innovate is massively underestimated, particularly in America. It's a sort of, I consider it to be a form of complacency that American executives assume that everything, all Chinese technology is just stolen from the West, and and this we've seen this film before. I mean, the Japanese were just copyists and they were rubbish, and then of course they completely took over the consumer electronics industry, and now South Korea is doing the same in cars and consumer electronics, and China is next. I mean, we've seen this movie before, so I think there's an amazing amount of innovation going on here. I mean, just in the areas that I've been looking at, clearly in 3D printing, there's actually quite a lot of interesting stuff happening in China. The biggest 3D printer in the world is in China. And what are they using it for? To build aircraft parts for the Chinese homegrown airliner that's going to take on Boeing and Airbus. And Boeing and Airbus sort of laugh at this and go, oh, you don't realise it takes decades to develop this, we don't need to worry about that. And this is what people said about Japanese watches and Japanese radios, and look what happened. Sony took over that industry. So I think this is all very much worth keeping an eye on, and I think there's a real danger of complacency in the West when it looks at China.